"You're worthless. You can't be relied on," my son-in-law screamed after I burned the turkey on Thanksgiving. The guests froze, but I smiled, stood up, and replied, "Then why do you rely on me when you need money?" What he did next made me call 911. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The November morning air in Phoenix carried that crisp desert coolness that reminded me why I'd moved here after Martha passed 5 years ago. At 7:30 a.m., the suburban streets were quiet holiday decorations already brightening every porch and yard. Driving through Rebecca's neighborhood, I felt that familiar mix of purpose and gratitude that came with being needed by family. I pulled into the driveway of the modest two-story home that I'd helped them secure back in 2019. The kitchen windows glowed warm yellow, and I could see my daughter moving around inside, already deep into Thanksgiving preparations. In my passenger seat sat my contribution to the day, a backup phone charger, extra batteries for the smoke alarm, and a small notebook where I'd written down the turkey timing instructions. After 43 years as an aerospace engineer, I'd learned that preparation prevented problems. Rebecca met me at the front door with a steaming coffee mug and that smile that still reminded me so much of her mother. "Dad, you're wonderful for doing this. Having you watch the turkey means I can handle everything else without panic." The kitchen buzzed with organized energy. Casserole dishes lined the counters, ingredients sorted into neat groups for stuffing, green bean casserole, and sweet potato soufflé. The centerpiece of it all sat thawing in a large roasting pan, an 18-pound turkey that would feed our extended family of 24 people. "Morning, Charles." Miguel appeared in the doorway, tie-loosened coffee mug in hand. His greeting was polite, but carried that subtle coolness I'd grown accustomed to over the past 7 years. "Hope everything goes smoothly this time." I ignored the implied doubt in his voice. It wasn't worth addressing, especially on Thanksgiving morning. "It will." "What time do the guests arrive?" 5:30, Rebecca answered, pulling herbs from the refrigerator. "That gives us plenty of time. The turkey needs to go in at 2:30, cook for 3 hours at 3:50. She walked me through the process, step by step, her teacher's instincts, making every instruction clear and precise. Herb seasoning rubbed under the skin, butter brushed over the top, aluminum foil tent for the first 2 hours. I listened carefully, nodding at each detail. "Set your phone alarm for exactly 30 minutes before you need to check it," she emphasized. "Dad, this timing is crucial. With this many people coming, everything has to be perfect." I pulled out my phone and plugged it into the charger I'd brought, setting the alarm while the battery showed a full charge. "Turkey check." 20 minutes, I typed into the reminder, then set a backup alarm for 25 minutes, just to be safe. Miguel lingered in the kitchen doorway, scrolling through his own phone. "I've got some work calls to make, then I need to run a few errands." "You'll be okay here alone, right?" There it was again, that hint of doubt disguised as concern. I'd been cooking holiday meals since before he was born, but somehow Miguel always found ways to question my capabilities. "He'll be fine," Rebecca said, firmly, shooting her husband, a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Dad's made more Thanksgiving dinners than both of us combined." 20-year-old Tommy bounded down the stairs, still pulling on a sweatshirt. "Morning, Grandpa. Need any help with the turkey prep?" This was why I kept showing up, despite Miguel's subtle digs. Tommy had inherited his mother's warmth and his great-grandmother's respect for family traditions. He was studying engineering at Arizona State, following in my footsteps, and every conversation reminded me that some things skip generations. "I could use help seasoning the bird," I said, grateful for his enthusiasm. We worked together in comfortable silence, my hands guiding his as we rubbed herbs under the turkey's skin. These moments reminded me why family mattered. The quiet cooperation, the shared purpose, the knowledge that we were creating something special together. "Dad, I need to run to the store," Rebecca announced, untying her apron. "Completely forgot cranberry sauce." Can you believe it? She gave me final instructions about the turkey timing, emphasizing the 30-minute check one more time. "Don't let anything distract you from that alarm." "Okay, I won't," I promised, walking her to the door. "Take your time. Everything's under control here." Miguel reappeared, dressed for his errands, keys jingling in his hand. "I should be back by 4, he said to Rebecca, kissing her cheek. Then to me, "Well, I guess we'll see how it goes, won't we?" "Yes, we will," I replied evenly, refusing to take the bait. After they left, the house settled into peaceful quiet. Tommy had gone back upstairs to study, leaving me alone with the responsibility I'd volunteered for. I double-checked my phone, fully charged alarm, set backup systems in place. The turkey sat ready for its 2:30 appointment with the oven. I settled into Rebecca's comfortable living room, chair phone within easy reach, feeling satisfied with the morning's preparation. This was what I lived for now, being useful, being needed, being part of something important. The turkey would be perfect. The family would gather, and for one evening, all the small tensions would disappear behind shared gratitude and tradition. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see the oven waiting patiently, ready to transform our holiday centerpiece into something magnificent. Everything was exactly as it should be. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting longer shadows through the living room windows. When I stirred in the comfortable chair, something was wrong. The air felt thick, and there was a smell, acrid, sharp, unmistakably the scent of something burning. My eyes snapped open. Smoke. Gray wisps were curling through the doorway from the kitchen, growing thicker by the second. I lurched forward in the chair, my heart hammering as the reality hit me like a physical blow. The turkey. I grabbed for my phone on the side table. The screen was black, completely dead. Despite all my preparation, despite the backup charger, despite every precaution I'd taken as a careful engineer, the battery had somehow failed during my nap. No alarms, no warnings, nothing. Racing to the kitchen, I was met by a wall of smoke that made my eyes water and my throat burn. The oven light glowed ominously through the haze, and when I yanked open the door, a blast of superheated air and thick black smoke poured out. Inside was a disaster beyond salvage. What had once been a beautiful 18-pound turkey now looked like something pulled from a house fire. The skin was charred black and split open, the stuffing burned to charcoal, and grease had pooled and burned on the oven floor, creating even more smoke. No, 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 I whispered, grabbing oven mitts and pulling the ruined bird from the oven. The metal pan was scorched black underneath, and the smell was overwhelming. Not just overcooked, but destroyed. I threw open every window I could reach, letting the cool November air rush in, but I knew it would take hours to clear the smoke completely. Hours we didn't have. The family would be returning soon, and guests were expected at 5:30. How long had I been asleep? How long had the turkey been burning? My phone was useless, but judging by the extent of the damage, it had to have been at least an hour, maybe more. An hour of steady burning that had transformed our holiday centerpiece into a blackened disaster. The front door opened just as I was desperately fanning smoke toward the open windows. Dad Rebecca's voice carried from the entryway, tinged with concern. "Do you smell that? Something's burning." My heart sank to my shoes. Through the front window, I could see not just Rebecca's car, but Miguel's truck and Frank's sedan. They'd all returned together 15 minutes earlier than expected, and they were walking into a house filled with smoke and the evidence of my complete failure. "What's that smell?" Frank's voice boomed as they filed through the front door. Behind Rebecca came Miguel, then my brother Frank, his wife Linda, and Tommy, all of them stopping short as the acrid smoke hit them. Rebecca appeared in the kitchen doorway first, her face shifting from concern to horror as she took in the scene. The smoke-filled air, my ash-stained shirt, the destroyed turkey cooling on the stovetop like evidence of some terrible crime. "Dad, what happened?" Her voice was small, shocked. I stood there with the oven mitts still on my hands, facing the family I'd let down in the worst possible way. There was nowhere to hide, no way to minimize what had happened. "I fell asleep," I said simply, the words feeling like a confession to murder. "My phone died. The alarm never went off. I'm so sorry." Miguel pushed past the others, his face going pale as he surveyed the kitchen disaster. The blackened turkey, the smoke stains on the cabinets, the grease splattered across the stovetop. His expression shifted from shock to something darker. "Jesus Christ, Charles," he breathed, then his voice began to climb. "Look at this mess. Sorry doesn't fix Thanksgiving, does it? 24 people are coming here in 90 minutes. Frank moved to open more windows while Linda checked on me with her nurse's instincts, asking if I was hurt, if I'd inhaled too much smoke. Tommy stood frozen in the doorway, his young face creased with disappointment and concern. But Miguel wasn't finished. He stepped closer to me, his face flushing red with anger and frustration. "This is exactly what I should have expected from you, isn't it?" The words hit me like physical blows. Rebecca reached toward her husband. "Miguel, please," he shook her off. "No, Rebecca. I'm tired of pretending this is okay. Look at what he's done to our holiday. Look at this disaster." Frank straightened up from the window he'd been opening, his face darkening with disapproval. "Now wait just a minute. Wait for what." Miguel's voice was getting louder, more aggressive. "For him to ruin Christmas too, Easter, every holiday, where we're stupid enough to trust him with something important." I stood perfectly still, absorbing each word. The smoke continued to drift through the open windows, but the poisonous atmosphere Miguel was creating felt thicker than anything coming from the oven. "I said I was sorry," I repeated, my voice steady despite the humiliation burning in my chest. "I'll find a solution. There has to be something we can do." "Solutions?" Miguel spun to face me fully. his eyes bright with a fury that seemed far too intense for a burned turkey. You think you can just fix everything, don't you? Well, this time your magic solutions won't work. Linda stepped protectively closer to me. Miguel, that's enough. It was an accident. An accident, he laughed bitterly. This is what happens when we rely on someone who can't be relied on. You're worthless, Charles. Completely worthless. The kitchen fell silent, except for the sound of fresh air flowing through the open windows. Everyone stared at Miguel, shocked by the venom in his voice, the cruelty of his words toward a man who'd just made an honest mistake. But I wasn't just hearing his words. I was remembering all the times he'd called me reliable, dependable, his savior. All those desperate phone calls when he needed money, needed help, needed someone to bail him out of another financial crisis. The hypocrisy of his accusation struck me like lightning. Worthless. Can't be relied on. I looked at this man who owed me more money than most people made in a year, who was screaming about reliability while standing in the house. I'd helped him buy, and something inside me finally snapped. Worthless. The word came out quieter than I'd intended, but it carried weight that made everyone in the room turn to look at me. Worthless, I repeated the word, letting it hang in the smoke-tinged air. Something had shifted inside me, a lifetime of patience finally reaching its limit. Miguel's eyes flashed with renewed fury at my quiet challenge. That's right, worthless. You want to know what your problem is, Charles. You act like some kind of hero, but when it actually matters, when people are counting on you, you fall asleep on the job. He grabbed the ruined turkey from where I'd set it on the counter, his face twisted with disgust. This is what we get when we trust you with anything important. Before anyone could stop him, he hurled the blackened bird toward the trash can. It missed, exploding against the kitchen wall in a shower of charred stuffing and grease that splattered across the white cabinets. Rebecca screamed, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. Frank stepped forward, his police training evident in his authoritative posture. That's enough, son. You need to calm down right now. But Miguel was beyond hearing reason. He wheeled around to face the room full of shocked family members, his voice climbing to a pitch that carried through the entire house. Calm down. This is Thanksgiving, the most important day of the year for families, and he destroyed it. He pointed at me like I was some kind of criminal, just like he destroys everything he touches. Linda moved protectively toward me, her face creased with moral disapproval. Miguel, stop this. You're talking about Rebecca's father. Father Miguel's laugh was sharp and bitter. What kind of father ruins his own family's holiday? What kind of man falls asleep when people are counting on him? Tommy stood frozen in the doorway, his young face pale with shock at witnessing this level of cruelty toward his grandfather. I could see tears starting in his eyes, and that sight cut deeper than any of Miguel's words. I said I was sorry, I repeated, maintaining what dignity I could, while turkey grease dripped down the wall behind me. I'll drive to the store right now. Maybe find another turkey somewhere. With what Miguel's voice cracked with frustrated rage. Everything's closed. There's nowhere to go. 24 people are coming here expecting dinner, and you've ruined it completely. He advanced on me, backing me toward the kitchen doorway. His face was purple now, veins standing out on his forehead, spittle flying as he shouted. The comfortable family kitchen had become a battlefield, and I was being driven from it like a defeated enemy. I'm done pretending to be grateful, he continued, his voice growing more vicious with each word. Done acting like you're helpful when all you do is cause problems. You can't be relied on for anything. Rebecca stepped between us, her teacher's instincts finally overriding her shock. Miguel, please. This is my father we're talking about. Your father who just ruined Thanksgiving, he shook off her restraining hand. Your father who can't be trusted with the simplest responsibility. When are you going to see him for what he really is? The living room beckoned behind me, offering more space but also making this humiliation more public. This was where family pictures lined the mantel, where Christmas mornings had happened, where grandchildren had played. Now it would become the stage for something ugly and irreversible. Frank positioned himself strategically between Miguel and me, his broad shoulders and calm authority a barrier against the escalating aggression. Miguel, you're talking about getting worked up over a turkey dinner. Think about what you're saying. A turkey dinner, Miguel's voice rose to near hysteria. This isn't just about dinner, this is about reliability, this is about trust. And this man, he jabbed his finger toward me again, has proven he can't handle either one. I backed into the living room, feeling the weight of family. Photos watching this scene unfold. Photos of happier times of holidays when gratitude flowed freely and family bonds felt unbreakable. Now those same bonds were being tested in the cruelest possible way. Every single time we trust him with anything. Miguel continued following me into the living room like a prosecutor, presenting evidence to a jury disaster. And I'm supposed to be grateful. I'm supposed to pretend he's helping. When he's just making everything worse, Linda found her voice sharp with moral authority. Miguel Thompson, you're acting like a child having a tantrum. This is not who Rebecca married. Oh, you want to know who she married? Miguel's eyes glittered dangerously. She married someone who's tired of cleaning up after this old man's mistakes. Christmas last year, he forgot to pick up the ham. Easter, the dessert he was supposed to bring, never showed up. Stop it, Rebecca whispered, tears starting in her eyes. Just stop. But Miguel was building momentum, years of grievances pouring out like infected wounds finally bursting. Every holiday, every family gathering, something goes wrong when we depend on him, and everyone just smiles and pretends it's okay because he's trying to help. I remained silent, watching him expose himself completely. Every word revealed more about his character than mine. The family was seeing it too. Frank's face growing darker with disapproval, Linda shaking her head sadly, Tommy looking genuinely frightened by this adult tantrum. You know what I think? Miguel stepped closer, invading my personal space, his coffee breath hot on my face. I think you do this on purpose. I think you like being the center of attention, having everyone fuss over your mistakes and make excuses for you. The accusation was so absurd, so completely backwards, that I almost laughed. But there was something else in his voice now, something that made my engineer's mind start connecting dots I'd refused to see before. Maybe it's time someone taught you there are consequences for your actions, he continued, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. Maybe it's time you learned what being unreliable really costs. Frank stepped directly between us, hands raised peacefully but firmly. That's enough. You're talking about a 68-year-old man in front of his family. Family, Miguel's voice cracked with bitter irony. What has he ever done for this family except cause problems? He's a burden, a liability. We'd all be better off without his so-called help. The room fell silent except for Rebecca's quiet sobbing. But I wasn't hearing just his words anymore. I was remembering all those desperate phone calls, all those times he'd begged for help, all those moments when I was his savior, his lifeline, his most reliable resource. And suddenly I understood exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. You want to talk about reliability, Miguel? My voice cut through his rant like a blade, quiet but carrying new authority that made everyone in the room stop and stare. Let's talk about who can really be counted on. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down between us. Miguel's face flickered with the first hint of uncertainty, as if he was finally hearing something in my voice that gave him pause. What are you talking about? He demanded, but there was less conviction in his tone. Now, a crack in the armor of his righteous anger. Frank stepped slightly aside, recognizing that this confrontation had moved beyond physical threat into something deeper, more fundamental. The family sensed it too. Rebecca wiping tears from her eyes, Linda leaning forward with interest, Tommy watching his grandfather with new attention. If I'm so unreliable, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word, if nobody can count on me, then explain something to me, Miguel. His jaw-clenched hands curling into fists at his sides. Explain what? Explain why you've counted on me so many times over the years. I stepped forward now, no longer backing away from his aggression. All those phone calls when you were desperate, all those times you needed help, all those moments when I was suddenly very reliable indeed. Miguel's eyes darted toward Rebecca, then back to me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his face, genuine fear. Not of physical confrontation, but of exposure. That's different, he said quickly. That's not the same thing. Different how I pressed. Different because you needed something from me then. Different because I was useful to you when you were in trouble. Rebecca's head snapped up her teacher's instincts, recognizing the shift in the room's dynamic. Dad, what are you talking about? But Miguel was already shaking his head frantically. Don't listen to him, Pris. He's just trying to change the subject, trying to make this about something else. Am I asked quietly. Or am I finally talking about what this has always been about? The living room had gone completely silent now. Even the sounds from outside seemed muted, as if the whole world was holding its breath for what was about to be revealed. Miguel took a desperate step toward me, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Charles, don't do this. Not here. Not in front of everyone. But I was done protecting his pride, done enabling his ingratitude, done pretending that his cruelty was acceptable because we were family. You called me worthless, I said, my voice carrying the weight of years of suppressed hurt. You said I can't be relied on. You want to have this conversation in front of the family, then let's have it properly. I looked around the room at the faces watching us. Rebecca's confusion, Frank's growing understanding, Linda's anticipation, Tommy's wide-eyed attention. They deserved to know the truth. They deserved to understand what kind of man was screaming about reliability, while standing in a house he couldn't have afforded without my help. Let's talk about reliability, Miguel, I said, settling into the methodical precision that had served me well through 43 years of engineering. Let's talk about who has really been there when it mattered. Let's talk about who can actually be counted on. Miguel's face went pale. Charles, please, but I was done with his pleas, just as I was done with his abuse. The truth was going to come out, all of it, and for the first time in years, I was going to let this family see exactly who had been reliable and who had been taking advantage of that reliability. December 2019, I began and watched Miguel's face crumble as he realized there was no stopping what was about to happen. December 2019, I began my voice, carrying the methodical precision that had guided me through decades of engineering problems. $15,000 for the down payment on this house. Miguel's face went white as the first blow landed. The room fell completely silent, everyone frozen as the magnitude of what I was revealing began to sink in. You came to my apartment that Sunday afternoon, remember, tears in your eyes, hands shaking. The bank had turned you down for the loan. You were 3 days away from losing your deposit, losing this house entirely. Rebecca's head snapped toward her husband, her eyes wide with shock. She'd known I'd helped with the house, but not the full extent, not the desperation that had driven Miguel to my door. I don't know what else to do, Charles. I continued, my memory crystal clear despite the years. We need $15,000 by Friday, or we lose everything. Priscilla doesn't know how bad at Island. The kids. Your voice cracked then, Miguel, all your pride stripped away. Frank leaned forward, his police officer's instincts, recognizing the shift from confrontation to testimony. Linda's hand went to her chest, beginning to understand the scope of what was being revealed. I wrote the check without hesitation, I said, looking directly at Miguel's stricken face. $15,000 from my retirement savings, handed over with no contract, no timeline for repayment, just trust between family members. Dad, Rebecca whispered the word, barely audible. I'll never forget this. I continued, quoting Miguel's exact words from that day. You're saving our whole future, Charles. I don't know how we'll ever repay you. Miguel opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. The man who had been screaming about my worthlessness just minutes ago now stood exposed as someone who had begged for my help when his back was against the wall. But you did forget, didn't you, Miguel? I pressed on my engineer's mind, systematically dismantling his accusations. 2 years later, you were back. Tommy stepped closer, his young face creased with confusion and growing understanding. This was his college money I was about to discuss, and he deserved to know the truth. April 2021, I continued. $8,000 for Tommy's spring semester tuition. Tommy's gasp was audible in the silent room. His scholarship had fallen through. I remembered some bureaucratic mix-up that left the family scrambling to cover costs they couldn't afford. You called me from the bursar's office, didn't you, Miguel, panic in your voice, because Tommy would have to drop out if the payment wasn't made by Monday. His whole future is on the line, you said. $8,000 might as well be $8 million for us right now. I looked at my grandson, seeing the shock and gratitude warring in his expression. I used money from my retirement fund that time, Tommy. Money I'd been saving for my own future, but your education seemed more important. Rebecca was crying, now tears streaming down her face as she began to understand the true scope of her father's sacrifice. Dad, I had no idea. Your husband called me a lifesaver that day, I said, never taking my eyes off Miguel's increasingly pale face. The most generous man I know, he said. Tommy's so lucky to have a grandfather like you. Miguel finally found his voice weak and desperate. Charles, that's different. Different how I asked the same question I'd posed earlier, but now with devastating evidence to back it up. Different because you needed something from me. Different because I was reliable when it served your purposes. Frank shook his head slowly, his disapproval of Miguel's hypocrisy written clearly across his weathered features. Linda's nurse's training had taught her to recognize patterns, and the pattern here was becoming unmistakably clear. But I wasn't finished being reliable for you, was I, Miguel? I continued relentlessly. September 2022. Your transmission died, remember, $3,500 to get your car running again. Miguel's shoulders sagged as if the weight of each revelation was physically crushing him. Please, Charles. Please what? Please don't tell the truth. Please don't remind everyone what really happened. My voice remained calm, controlled, but there was steel in it now. You called me from the mechanic's shop, desperate again. I need the car for work, Charles. Without it, I can't support my family. They want $3,500 to fix it, and I just don't have it. I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air flowing through the open windows. I drove straight to that shop and paid cash while you waited. Cash from my dwindling retirement account, Miguel. And what did you say to me that day? He closed his eyes, unable to meet my gaze. You always come through, Charles. I don't deserve a father-in-law like you. Those were your exact words. Do you remember saying them? The silence in the room was deafening. Rebecca stared at her husband as if seeing him for the first time, while Tommy looked at his grandfather with new respect and dawning shame at what his education had cost this generous man. 3 separate times I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. 3 separate emergencies where you came to me desperate, begging for help. And every time, every single time I was reliable, I came through. I solved your problems with my own money, my own sacrifice. Miguel's face was crumbling now, the aggressive mask completely fallen away to reveal the desperate, indebted man underneath. So tell me again, Miguel, I said, my engineer's precision cutting through his hypocrisy like a laser through steel. Tell me again how I can't be relied on. Tell me again how I'm worthless. Tell me again how I never do anything for this family. But I wasn't finished. The engineer in me demanded complete accuracy, total disclosure. Miguel needed to hear it all, and this family deserved to know the full extent of what had been happening behind their backs. Last winter, I continued relentlessly. $12,000 for Rebecca's medical bills when her insurance wouldn't cover the full amount. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. She remembered that surgery, the complications that had kept her in the hospital longer than expected, but she'd never known the true cost. I met you at the hospital billing office while she was recovering upstairs, I said to Miguel, who was now visibly shaking. You cried that day real tears of gratitude and shame. I'll pay you back, you whispered. Every penny, I swear, on my children's lives. Frank's face had gone hard with moral judgment. Linda shook her head slowly, her nurse's understanding of medical costs, making the sacrifice even more meaningful to her. But there were smaller things, too, weren't there, Miguel? The $200 for groceries when your paycheck was late, the $500 for heating bills in February, the $300 when the washing machine died. My voice remained steady, methodical, accounting for every dollar. Just until payday, you'd always say. You know I'm good for it, Charles. Tommy stepped closer to me, his young face creased with shame and newfound respect. Grandpa, I never knew. $45,000, I said, letting the number hang in the air like a verdict. Over 6 years, Miguel. Every time you needed help, every time you were desperate, who did you call? Who was reliable then? The silence was deafening. Miguel stood cornered, his aggressive posture collapsed into something smaller, defeated. The man who had been screaming about my worthlessness now faced the mathematical proof of his own dependence. How much have you paid back? I asked quietly. Not 1 penny. How many times have you said thank you since that first desperate afternoon? I'm still waiting. Rebecca stared at her husband with new eyes, seeing him perhaps for the first time as he really was. Frank and Linda exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their judgment of Miguel's character. So tell me again about reliability, Miguel, I said, stepping closer to him, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Tell me again about who can't be counted on. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been counting on this worthless old man to save you over and over again. Miguel's face cycled through emotions. Shock, denial, rage, and finally something darker. Desperation. The truth had destroyed his victim narrative, completely exposed him as a hypocrite and an ingrate in front of his own family. You think you've won, he whispered, his voice cracking with frustrated fury. You think you can humiliate me in my own house. The dangerous edge in his voice made Frank step forward instinctively, his police training recognizing the signs of a man pushed beyond his breaking point. No, Rebecca started toward her husband, but it was too late. Miguel lunged at me with surprising speed for a man his size, desperation giving him strength. His fist swung toward my face, and I stepped back quickly, hands rising defensively. The blow missed by inches, but his momentum carried him forward, and we both stumbled toward the coffee table. Stop! Rebecca screamed. Frank moved with the reflexes of a man who'd spent 30 years in law enforcement. He grabbed Miguel's arms from behind, his voice booming with authority. That's enough. You're attacking a 68-year-old man, but Miguel was beyond reason now. He struggled against Frank's grip, elbowing backward, trying to break free. Let me go. He destroyed my life. He destroyed everything. Get back. Linda called to Rebecca and Tommy, shepherding them toward the front door. He's completely lost control. I rolled away from the coffee table, getting to my feet carefully. My shoulder throbbed where Miguel had clipped me during his wild swing, but nothing felt broken. Around us, the living room had transformed into chaos. Overturned magazines, a lamp knocked askew, the comfortable family space. Now a crime scene. You ruined my marriage, Miguel screamed, still fighting Frank's restraint. Turned my wife against me, made me look like a fool in front of everyone. You did that yourself, I said quietly, backing toward the kitchen where I'd left my phone. He broke free from Frank's grip, with a surge of desperate strength charging after me again. I'll kill you, do you hear me? I'll kill you for this. The kitchen loomed behind me and I could see the knife block on the counter. This was dangerous territory, but Miguel's eyes had fixed on the same target, his face twisted with murderous rage. Miguel, there are children in this neighborhood, Rebecca pleaded, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong with you? Frank grabbed him again, this time getting a better hold. Brother or not, I won't let you hurt an innocent man. I reached the counter and found my phone where I'd left it hours ago. The screen showed just enough battery for what I needed to do. This had gone beyond family dispute into genuine violence, and I knew what had to happen next. He's not innocent, Miguel writhed against Frank's grip. He's a manipulator, a user. He planned this whole thing. Planned burning the turkey, Tommy called from the doorway, his voice shaking but defiant. Planned you losing your temper. Listen to yourself. My fingers found 911 on the keypad. 3 simple numbers that would bring official help, formal consequences, an end to this nightmare. 911. What's your emergency? The operator's voice came through clearly. I need police at 847 Desert View Drive, I said calmly, despite the chaos around me. Domestic violence. My son-in-law has physically attacked me. There are multiple witnesses. No, Miguel's scream echoed through the house. Put that phone down, sir. Are you injured? The operator asked, minor bruising on my shoulder. The main concern is that he's threatened to kill me, and family members had to physically restrain him. Units are being dispatched. Stay on the line. Frank maintained his hold on Miguel, who had stopped struggling and now stared at my phone with the horror of a man realizing the full consequences of his actions. Charles, hang up. Please, we can work this out as family. We stopped being family the moment you put your hands on me, I replied, keeping the operator on the line. 5 minutes felt like hours. Frank kept Miguel pinned against the kitchen counter while I stayed connected with dispatch. Rebecca paced the living room, wringing her hands. Linda and Tommy huddled near the front window, watching for squad cars. I can see them coming, Tommy announced. Red and blue lights flashed across the house, painting the holiday decorations in official colors. Car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps approached the front door. Phoenix Police Department. Open up. Linda unlocked the door quickly. 2 officers stepped inside. A tall woman with graying hair and a younger man built like a linebacker. Their eyes swept the scene professionally, taking in the overturned furniture, frightened family members, and obvious signs of struggle. I'm Officer Martinez, the woman said. Who called 911? I raised my hand. Charles Davis. That's my son-in-law there. He physically attacked me after a family argument. Is anyone injured? Officer Martinez approached me, noting my torn shirt and the red mark on my shoulder. Minor bruising, nothing requiring medical attention. The male officer moved toward Frank and Miguel. Sir, I need you to step away from him. Frank released his grip reluctantly. Officer, this man attacked his elderly father-in-law. I had to restrain him to prevent serious injury. Miguel straightened his clothing, trying to regain composure. This is all a misunderstanding. A family disagreement that got out of hand. Attempted assault on an elderly person isn't a misunderstanding, Martinez said firmly. She turned to me. Tell me exactly what happened. I spoke calmly, methodically. We had a disagreement about a ruined turkey dinner. When I revealed that my son-in-law owes me over $45,000 in unpaid loans, he became enraged and physically attacked me, threatening to kill me. These family members witnessed everything. Martinez took notes while scanning the room. How many witnesses? Frank stepped forward. I'm Frank Davis, his brother. I watched Miguel throw food, then lunge at Charles with clear intent to cause harm. Linda found her voice. I'm Linda Chen, family friend. I saw the entire incident. Miguel completely lost control, made death threats. Tommy nodded agreement. I'm his grandson. The violence started after Grandpa mentioned money Miguel borrowed but never repaid. The second officer approached Rebecca, who stood torn between loyalty and truth. Ma'am, you witnessed this incident. She looked at her husband, then her father, tears flowing freely. Yes. My husband? He attacked my father. Threatened to hurt him. I've never seen him like this before. Miguel's face crumbled as his wife's testimony sealed his fate. Rebecca, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, she said quietly. My father has been supporting our family for years, and you repaid his kindness with violence. Officer Martinez addressed the room. Based on multiple witness statements, I'm placing you under citation for domestic assault, Mr. Martinez. This is ridiculous, Miguel protested. He provoked me, humiliated me in front of my family. Emotional provocation doesn't justify physical violence, Martinez replied firmly. She produced a citation book. You have the right to contest this in court, but the evidence and witness testimony are clear. The younger officer photographed the overturned furniture, my torn shirt, the evidence of struggle throughout the room. What happens now? Rebecca asked quietly. Your husband receives an official citation. If he commits any further acts of violence or harassment against Mr. Davis, he'll face arrest and formal charges. This incident is now part of the official record. Martinez handed me a card. Mr. Davis, you have the right to pursue a restraining order if you feel unsafe. Given the age difference and violent threats, the court would likely approve protective measures. That won't be necessary, I said, meeting Miguel's eyes, as long as this behavior never happens again. The officers completed their paperwork while family members processed what had just occurred. Official intervention, truth documented justice served through proper channels. We're finished here, Martinez announced. Mr. Martinez, any future incidents will result in immediate arrest. The citation requires a court appearance within 30 days. As the police cars pulled away, Miguel stood isolated in his own kitchen, facing the consequences of 6 years of ingratitude culminating in violence. The silence that followed the police car's departure was profound, broken only by the sound of Miguel crumpling the citation in his trembling hand. The official document represented more than legal consequences. It marked the complete collapse of his victim narrative and the end of 6 years of taking my generosity for granted. Rebecca approached me carefully, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes clear with new understanding. Dad, I had no idea. $45,000. And I never even knew the full extent of what you were sacrificing for us. I reached out and took her hand, feeling the weight of years of unspoken appreciation finally being acknowledged. You had your own family to worry about, sweetheart. That's how it should be. Frank shook his head slowly, his weathered face creased with a mixture of pride and anger. Willard, you handled that entire situation with more dignity than I would have managed. Most men would have pressed full charges after what he put you through. Linda moved to check my shoulder where Miguel's wild swing had connected her nurse's training, automatically assessing for injury. The way you stayed calm during that attack, that shows real character. A lesser man would have let anger guide his response. Tommy stepped closer, his young face flushed with shame and newfound respect. Grandpa, I can't believe you used your retirement money for my tuition. I never asked you to do that. I never even knew. That's what grandfathers do, I said simply. We invest in the future even when the present is uncertain. Miguel stood alone by the kitchen counter, the citation still clutched in his fist, facing the reality of what his ingratitude and violence had cost him, not just legally but morally. The family he'd tried to turn against me now saw him clearly for what he was. I don't know how to repay you, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The money, yes, but also this, what I've done here today. Rebecca turned to face her husband, and I could see the teacher in her, the woman who dealt with difficult children every day, making a decision about consequences and accountability. You can start by acknowledging the truth, she said firmly, and by making sure this violence never happens again. I won't have my children seeing their father attack their grandfather. The weight of her words settled over Miguel like a judgment. His wife, the woman whose loyalty he'd counted on, had chosen truth over blind support, character over blood relation. Frank surveyed the disheveled living room, taking in the overturned furniture and the evidence of conflict that had torn through our family gathering. Well, we still have a Thanksgiving dinner to figure out. Can't let one man's tantrum ruin the whole holiday. Linda smiled for the first time in hours, her practical nature asserting itself. I know a restaurant that delivers traditional dinners. It's expensive but worth it under the circumstances. I'll pay for it, Miguel said quickly, then caught himself with bitter irony. I mean, if I can use a credit card since I don't actually have cash available. The hypocrisy of his financial situation wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Here was a man who'd just screamed about my worthlessness while standing in a house he couldn't have afforded without my help, offering to pay for dinner with credit because he had no savings of his own. But Rebecca's expression had shifted from anger to something more complex. disappointment mixed with a kind of maternal firmness I recognized from her teaching days. Miguel, you need to understand something, she said, her voice carrying new authority. My father didn't just give us money over the years. He gave us his security, his retirement, his peace of mind. And he did it quietly without asking for recognition or gratitude. She looked around the room at the family members who'd witnessed this entire confrontation. Everyone here now knows what kind of man my father island. They also know what kind of man you've shown yourself to be. Tommy nodded emphatically. Grandpa never once mentioned the money he'd given us. Not once. Even when I complained about college costs or worried about dropping out, he never said anything about what he'd already sacrificed. Frank's police officer instincts had been observing Miguel throughout this conversation, and I could see him cataloging the man's responses, his body language, his level of genuine remorse versus self-pity. The citation is just the beginning, Frank said bluntly. The real consequences are standing right here in this room. You've lost the respect of your family, Miguel. That's something that has to be earned back, not demanded. Linda touched my arm gently. Charles I, hope you know that what happened here today, the way you handled Miguel's attack, the dignity you maintained, that's going to be remembered long after the Turkey disaster is forgotten. I looked around at these people who'd become my witnesses, my jury, and ultimately my vindication. Not because they'd chosen sides, but because they'd chosen truth. What matters most is that we're still family, I said, meaning it despite everything that had happened. Miguel made mistakes, serious ones that led to legal consequences, but destroying him won't solve anything. Rebecca moved to stand beside me, her choice clear and final. Dad, I'm so sorry it took something like this for me to see how much you've been carrying for all of us. That's going to change. Miguel looked up from the citation, his face showing the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him all day. Not anger or self-pity, but actual shame. I don't deserve forgiveness. Not after what I said, what I did. Forgiveness and consequences aren't mutually exclusive, I replied. You'll face the legal system for the violence. You'll face your family for the ingratitude. But you'll also have the chance to become the man your wife and children deserve. The room fell quiet as everyone processed the weight of what had transpired. A family had been tested, truth had been revealed, justice had been served, and now the long work of rebuilding could begin. But first we had a Thanksgiving dinner to salvage and a family to feed. Within an hour the house had been transformed. Frank and Tommy straightened the overturned furniture, while Linda coordinated the dinner delivery. The restaurant's Thanksgiving feast arrived in insulated containers. Turkey stuffing, cranberry sauce, all the traditional dishes that should have graced our table hours ago. As we gathered around the dining room table, the family looked different than it had that morning. Relationships had shifted, truth had been revealed, consequences had been faced, but we were still together, still family. I'd like to say something before we eat, Rebecca announced, raising her water glass. The evening light streaming through the windows caught the tears still glistening in her eyes, but her voice was strong and clear. Today I learned that my father is not just reliable, he's extraordinary. His generosity, his patience, his dignity under pressure. Dad, thank you for everything you've sacrificed for us, and I'm sorry it took something like this for me to truly see it. Frank lifted his glass next, to integrity and family. To a man who maintained his character even when others lost theirs. Linda joined the toast. To Charles, the most generous man any of us know, and proof that true strength is quiet strength. Tommy's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. To my grandfather who gave up his security for my education and never once made me feel guilty about it. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that sacrifice. Even Miguel raised his glass, though his hand trembled and his voice was barely audible. To second chances and to the man who gave me more of them than I deserved. As we began eating the restaurant-prepared meal, I reflected on the strange turns this day had taken. The burned turkey that had started everything now seemed almost insignificant compared to the truths that had been revealed, the family bonds that had been tested and ultimately strengthened. You know, Frank said, cutting into his turkey, this might be the best Thanksgiving dinner we've ever had, and it's not because of the food. Rebecca reached over and squeezed my hand. Dad, I want you to know that things are going to be different from now on. No more taking your help for granted. No more assuming you'll just quietly fix our problems without acknowledgement. And no more enabling, I said gently, looking at Miguel. Help when it's needed, support when it's asked for, but with clear understanding on both sides about what that means. Miguel nodded the citation from his pocket, serving as a tangible reminder of where unchecked entitlement could lead. I have a lot to make up for. Not just the money, but the respect, the gratitude I should have shown years ago. Tommy leaned forward, his engineering student's mind already working on practical solutions. Grandpa, I want to set up a payment plan for my tuition money. I'm getting a part-time job, and I can start paying you back monthly. That's not necessary, I started, but he shook his head firmly. It is necessary. For me, I need to understand the value of what you gave me, and I need to contribute to my own future. Linda smiled approvingly. That's the attitude of a young man who understands responsibility. As the evening progressed and the family shared stories, laughed together, and slowly healed from the day's trauma, I found myself thinking about the nature of reliability, respect, and family bonds. I was still the man who had burned the turkey. That mistake was real, and I owned it completely. But I was also the man who had quietly supported this family for years, who had maintained his dignity under attack, and who had chosen mercy over revenge when justice was within his power. Charles, Frank said as we finished dessert, I have to ask, how did you stay so calm during all of that? Most men would have lost their temper, said things they'd regret. I considered his question carefully. 43 years as an engineer teaches you that problems have solutions, and that emotional reactions usually make those solutions harder to find. Miguel was having an emotional breakdown. I needed to stay logical. But it was more than that, Rebecca observed. You could have destroyed him, completely exposed every detail of his financial dependence, made him look even worse. But you didn't. Because destroying him wouldn't have helped our family heal, I replied. Sometimes the most reliable thing you can do is know when to stop when enough truth has been revealed to solve the problem without causing unnecessary damage. Miguel looked up from his untouched dessert. I don't understand how you can be so forgiving. After what I said, what I did. Forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences, I explained. You have a court date to face a family to rebuild trust with and debts to acknowledge. But carrying anger would only hurt me, and I'm too old to waste energy on resentment. As the evening wound down and family members began to leave, each person stopped to hug me to express gratitude, not just for the day's revelations, but for years of quiet support they were now seeing clearly. Tommy lingered last, helping me clear the dishes. Grandpa, I hope someday I can be the kind of man you are, reliable in the ways that really matter. You already are, I assured him. You stood up for what was right today, even when it was difficult. That's the foundation of real character. After everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, I sat in Rebecca's living room, the same room where the confrontation had unfolded hours earlier. The furniture was back in place, the family photos still lined the mantel, but something fundamental had changed. Respect, I realized, couldn't be demanded or assumed. It had to be earned through consistent character, through reliability in the moments that mattered most. Not perfection. I'd proven that with the burned turkey, but integrity under pressure, dignity in conflict, and wisdom in victory. The most important victories weren't the ones where you defeated your enemies, but the ones where you maintained your character while truth revealed itself. I had been tested today, and while I'd made mistakes, I'd also proven what kind of man I was when everything was on the line. That felt like the most reliable thing I'd ever accomplished. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, continued healing, and the long work of rebuilding family relationships on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. But tonight I was simply grateful for family that had chosen truth over comfort, for consequences that brought justice, and for the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you've lived up to your own values when it mattered most. The burned turkey was forgotten. The character revealed would be remembered forever. Sometimes the most profound lessons come from the moments that test us most deeply. Today taught me that true reliability isn't about never making mistakes. It's about maintaining your character when everything falls apart. It's about choosing dignity over revenge, truth over comfort, and wisdom over anger. Family isn't just about blood relations or shared names. It's about who stands with you when the truth is hard, who chooses character over convenience, and who understands that love sometimes requires boundaries. The people who sat around that dinner table tonight proved that respect must be earned through actions, not assumed through relationships. At 68, I learned that the greatest victories aren't won through force or manipulation, but through quiet consistency, patient generosity, and the courage to speak truth when it matters most. The burned turkey will be forgotten by next week, but the character we showed today will echo through generations. If you found meaning in this story of family forgiveness and the true nature of reliability, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts about family dynamics and earned respect in the comments below. Your experiences matter and help others who might be facing similar challenges. Click the video on the left to hear another story about family truth and the strength that comes from standing up for what's right. Thank you for listening, and remember, the most reliable thing you can be is true to your own character, especially when it costs you something.